Hello, people of the internet. Welcome back to another episode of Movies Good, Internet Bad, a celebration of the cinema uploaded right here to the place that hates it the most. I'm Cory, that's Shane. The Acolyte got canceled, and we're going to talk about it. Shane, I hope the booze is flowing for you, sir. How are you?
I'm good. It's such an interesting time that the internet about exploded a couple days ago when this was announced. So excited to talk about it with you. We talked about the Acolyte a lot on this show, but I think that this kind of recontextualizes Star Wars in general. So it's a pretty interesting discussion, I think.
Yeah, no spoiler warning for this one because we don't really have to worry about it because it's
That's
going to
true.
get tax purposed off Disney Plus
That's
probably in
true.
like a
Nobody's
couple of
gonna know it
days.
exists.
Anyways, please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We hit a milestone a couple weeks ago of 50 subscribers, which is awesome. The next goal is 100, and we need your help to get there. So tell your friends. But yeah, so Shane, the Acolyte was a show that existed for a very short period of time on Disney Plus. It was a new venture
Yeah.
into a previously unexplored part of the Star Wars timeline. It cost about $180 million to create. Came out of the gate with some pretty strong viewership, but it appears that some of that tailed off. There was also a lot of discourse on the interwebs about
Are you
it.
sure?
I think so.
Was there?
The last
Was
time I
anyone
checked,
talking about it?
there may have been people talking about the show. I don't know. If you could Google that during this recording
Okay, I
and
will.
follow up with me and have it on my desk by end of day, that'd be fantastic. So what the hell is going on at Lucasfilm? What the hell is going on in the world of streaming, television? It all seems really weird. And you're the smart guy on the show, so I'm gonna kick my feet up and let you go.
All right. I think for the Acolyte, as a Star Wars fan, and I said this on the review, I am disappointed that it's not getting a season 2, even though I didn't love the show. Like I said on our review that I think, and with a lot of other shows, season 2 generally can improve things. I think reading all of the interviews with Leslie Headland, it seems like she had some good ideas, and it seems like she was heading in the right direction, even if the execution was not good at all. However, if I put on like my logical thinking cap, there was no way this was ever getting a season 2, right? Like, just factually, if you look at the state of facts or surrounding this show, it cost $180 million.
Yeah.
That is wildly expensive.
Yep.
So it's already a massive risk just to do the first season. They got 8 episodes of it, and most of those episodes were about 30 minutes.
Yeah.
So it's almost like a $180 million 4-hour movie, right?
Yeah. I think it clocks in at about 4.5 hours total.
Yeah, so it's not a ton of content. There's a lot that it's a lot of money per minute of footage, basically.
Oh yeah.
So with with that budget fact, the show either has to be really, really good or really, really successful and well viewed, right? In order to get a season 2. And the hope is that if something's really good, it'll pick up an audience over time, something like Succession, right?
Sure.
Even by the end of it, it was not getting crazy viewership, but it built. If you look at the viewership over time, season 1 was not very well watched at all. Season 2 was a little bit more. Season 3 a little bit more.
Yep.
But part of that is because it kept winning awards,
right?
And it had really great word of mouth. I didn't start watching Succession until midway through season 3, when enough people told me you have to watch this show.
Exactly.
And eventually I caught up and I watched it, right? But there was no indication that that was ever going to happen with The Acolyte, because when you look at it, it started with decent reviews and started with decent viewership. I think the viewership was about on par with Ahsoka for the premiere episodes.
Yep.
But by the end of it, the viewership was about half of what Ahsoka was. And if you look at, I don't care about the audience reviews for this because they're irrelevant.
Sure.
It was review bombed so badly that you can't even take that metric. But if you look at the critics' reviews, they started maybe in the 90s or high 80s and ended, I think, at 78. So even the critics' reviews were going down over time. And so if your viewership is going down and your reviews are going down, why on earth would you greenlight another season of the show? Because there's no indication that it would pick up an audience over time.
Right.
And it might be better. And I think it would be better. As a Star Wars fan, I think season 2 would be better than season 1.
Sure.
But am I willing to bet $180 million on that? No.
Yeah.
And I don't think any executive would. And so all of the tweets that are going back and forth about, we won, or look at how you're catering to the worst part of the fandom. I don't think that's relevant at all. I don't think that the backlash was the problem. I think it was purely a business decision. It did not have the viewership that they wanted for the show, given the amount of money that they spent on it. And so they didn't continue it. Yeah. And I think the real thing we should be talking about is not, did it get renewed for season 2, but why on earth would you spend $180 million on a risky venture with a relatively unproven showrunner and a time period that has no built-in attachment or fan base to it?
Yep.
If you're going to make a show like that and you're going to let it cook over time, why would you spend that much money?
Don't know.
If you had spent a quarter of it, then it's an easy green light for season 2, right? If you'd spent $50 million, maybe 60, it's an easy green light for the next season because you get enough of an audience and maybe it'll get better. Something like Parks and Rec. The first season's very bad. Everyone unanimously says it sucks. And then season 2, they retooled it and then it got better. But guess what? That's a really cheap show. Yeah. It's not very expensive. There's like one location, and maybe they go elsewhere occasionally, but there's 2 or 3 locations or something like The Office. And I think it points to a problem with streaming in general, where it almost feels like they're budgeting these like they need to be these big cinematic movies and putting them as like limited series, but that's not what TV has been for however many years, right?
Yep.
And I think that's maybe what's happening with Disney in general, is they're reprioritizing things and saying, the way we were doing things several years ago when we first spun this up and we're trying to shove as many shows on here as possible and giving them high budget so that it's very cinematic and everything like that. I think they're rethinking that approach, right? They took Mando season 4 to theaters. They took Moana 2 to theaters instead of on the streaming service. I think, but like something like Percy Jackson is getting a season 2, but I would imagine that's relatively cheap comparatively, right?
Yeah. Less locations, no big name actors.
Yeah.
A lot of volume sets, which honestly, that's what the volume was like.
I know, right?
And developed for, was to help keep budgets low on television shows. But
yeah,
that's a conversation for another day.
It's so weird. The whole volume thing was supposed to keep budgets down, and yet it seems like everything that's shot on the volume is so expensive. Even like House of the Dragon. House of the Dragon uses volume a ton, and that's like the most expensive show on television.
Probably, yeah.
Makes no sense.
Yeah, I don't know, man. The idea of cinematic TV is a little strange to me, because it used to be that TV was where you would go for the smaller, more intimate stories, and all the big cinematic things you'd go to the cinema for, because you see it on a giant screen. You have a huge sound system, big subwoofers that rattle your ass in the chair, like all that kind of stuff. And then you'd go home and you'd watch The Sopranos or The Wire or Breaking Bad or Lost or
focused shows.
Right. All those shows that are on the Mount Rushmore of TV, none of them carried $180 million budgets for 8 episodes. Like I think they said that the first couple seasons of Breaking Bad cost like $10 or $11 million for the entire season. And they were doing 13 episodes.
Yeah.
Right. At 44-minute runtimes.
One episode of The Acolyte.
Right. To put it into perspective, we just had a conversation about Alien Romulus, which is a 2-hour movie that only cost $80 million. You could make 2 Alien Romuluses for what you made The Acolyte for.
And you would make a whole lot more money in theaters.
Right. You're charging $7 a month to get in the door for people to watch The Acolyte. How are you going to ever make that money back?
No,
right. So when Disney, which, as much as I hate to talk about this side of the industry, they're a publicly traded company. They have shareholders that they have to answer to. When they're not making as much money as the shareholders need them to, they have to find other ways to show cash flow and freedom of cash and all that other kind of stuff. How are you going to do that? You're going to tighten up your purse strings when it comes to spending, right? So even if the Acolyte got the chance to go on, it wouldn't carry $180 million budget.
There's
right?
no way.
It wouldn't happen. And I think a lot of the future shows that you see, whether they're Star Wars or whether they're Marvel or whatever, doesn't matter. I think you're going to see things get dialed back quite a bit. And the big bucks are going to go towards the tent poles, the theatrical releases, that sort of thing. And if Star Wars or Marvel or whoever can't figure out how to make a show on television that doesn't have to rely on a huge VFX budget or something, then that's a deeper problem that they need to, kind of look within and find the answers to.
Yeah. And I think that speaks to really the biggest question that comes after this is, what is the strategy at Lucasfilm right now?
I don't know. I plead the fifth. I got no idea.
I do not understand what they're doing. And it doesn't make sense to me which direction they want to take it. It felt like this is a play at expanding the Star Wars audience, and maybe you spend to do that, but it seems like that wasn't really working. And it also pissed off a lot of your core audience. Yeah. We can argue about what constitutes the Star Wars core audience, but that doesn't seem like a winning strategy to make shows like The Acolyte, both financially and from a PR perspective. Although I think part of that you got to kind of suck it up. I do think it is a bit unfortunate that nobody at Lucasfilm defended the cast and crew against all of this hatred that they got online. It feels really bad when you see the comments and like Amanda's Instagram comments. They're just hateful.
It's bad.
But like, what's weird is you did get a lot of those defenses when Obi-Wan came out. Right. And was it Moses Ingram? Is that her name?
Mm-hmm.
When she got all that hate, you did see a lot of that defense, but then you don't see it here, which felt really weird. But I don't know what the plan is. Is the plan that you're going, like, let's look at the upcoming slate of what Star Wars is, right?
Yeah.
We have Andor season 2.
Well, there's something before that.
We have Skeleton Crew,
which is who the hell knows what that is?
Yeah. Well,
is it a limited series? Is it more than one season?
Decent. But again, limited series, one season. I don't think it's going to move the needle enough for people to really get invested, but I could be wrong. I don't know.
Okay, but before you go on, after something like The Acolyte comes out and then abruptly gets canceled, is it worth it to get invested in a new Star Wars property?
Well, it's already been confirmed to be a limited series, right? So I don't think that was the goal. It's meant to be just a little fun thing. But
sure, but anything new that comes out with new characters.
It's a good point, right? If you look at all the shows that have been announced and movies that have been announced over time, and like none of them have happened, where's the trust factor, right? How are you going to trust anything that Disney is either producing or announcing when it either doesn't get made or gets made and then canceled and never talked about again?
Right.
So it's tough. The same discussion was happening kind of with Book of Boba Fett, where I guess Tamura Morrison wants to do a season 2, but just they haven't really called him back. It's pretty sad that people had clamored for a Boba Fett property anything for so long, and then you get it and it's not very good, and then they just abandon the idea completely and the character completely. It's pretty sad. But so you've got Skeleton Crew, which is not a recurring property.
Correct.
You got Andor, which is the last season and leads directly into an existing property. You've got Ahsoka season 2, maybe. It's announced, but it's
announced, but not in production or anything yet.
Right. So you wonder,
it's a long way away.
Yeah.
Whenever it does come out.
Yeah, if they're gonna make it, it'll be a while. And that again just kind of points you back in the same universe that we've existed in. You've got the Mandalorian and Grogu, which seemingly is the only thing Star Wars wants to do at this point is Mando something.
Yep.
Because it was the only one that really hit for them. And then you've got a Rey movie with a documentary filmmaker. You've got James Mangold's movie that people are going to ask him about in 10 years and see if it's still on track. And he's going to be like, maybe one day. It'll just never see the light of day, I think. And then you've got Dave Filoni's Avengers type movie. But by that point, do you have enough properties feeding into an Avengers type movie for people to care?
Who knows? They haven't announced anything.
It almost feels like they are throwing shit at the wall and nothing is sticking. Right. And so now they don't know what to do.
Yep. It's tough because it kind of goes back to the Acolyte stuff where it's like, hey, maybe this wasn't perfect, but stay the course. And don't do the knee-jerk reaction thing.
Yeah.
To get rid of it, right?
If you don't have any better ideas, then maybe just continue. I don't know. And again, like, it doesn't make sense financially, but I would argue the problem is you got to make good stuff.
Yes.
I think Andor has been the only supremely high quality thing that they've produced on Disney Plus. Mando season 1 was good. I don't think it's top tier or anything, but I think that cleared the quality bar enough that a lot of people got invested. A lot of people liked it. Clearly, a lot of people viewed it and bought merch and everything.
Oh, yeah.
So that's a success, right? But out of everything they've done, the only successful things really have been Mandalorian season 1 and Andor. Out of all the stuff they've done. And so that calls into question, how do you fix that? Like, I hate to be the guy that goes there because all the crazies have been on this for years, but like, does this call into question, like, is Kathy the right leader in that arena? Obviously, she's a phenomenal executive producer. Yeah. Nobody can deny the work she's done over however many years of her career.
Of course.
But is she a good studio head? Did she handle the sequels correctly? I would argue probably not. After The Last Jedi thing, I think they should have just committed to it.
Stayed the course.
Just commit to it. Yeah. And I think that's the issue. Is it's almost like they're being too risk averse. They take a risk, and when it doesn't work out perfectly, then they like go the complete other way.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not the way to do it. That's reactionary. That's reacting to your audience. It's not planning ahead of the audience.
Yeah, it's like when your girlfriend tells you you don't do enough for me, and then 3 hours later you come home with a bouquet of flowers, 12 chocolate bars, and go out to a nice dinner. It's like, okay, it's too little, too late. You can't just like complete 180 on it.
Yeah,
and expect everything to be forgiven, right?
Yeah.
Same thing goes on the creative side of things too. If you're going to promise trilogies to directors, or if you're going to bring people in to make shows and start to put together writers' rooms for second seasons and then just cancel stuff, who's going to come work for you?
Nobody. Yeah.
Do you think Rian Johnson is ever going to come back to Star Wars? No. God, no. It's never going to happen.
It's crazy to me. The leadership within the company felt that The Last Jedi was good enough and Rian Johnson was good enough to work with, that they gave him an entire trilogy, and then a couple people got mad about the movie, and they didn't do any of that.
And it's gone.
It's crazy to me.
And in that time, Rian Johnson has gone on to be nominated for Best Screenplay at the Oscars twice, and has an Emmy-nominated television show.
Yeah.
And I think he made $40 million for the Netflix deal for the Knives Out movies.
Yeah. And
why would he ever go back to Lucasfilm?
Yeah. And this is where you're going to run into issues, right? Because now it's, why would I ever work on Star Wars? Because if a couple people get mad about what I do, I'm never going to continue my story. I'm never going to finish the story that I want.
Right.
And so if that's the vibe, how are you going to hire any creatives with good talent? Who's ever going to do it? The only people that are going to be working on Star Wars in 5 years are Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau. That seems like the only people.
Yeah.
And even George didn't want to work on it anymore.
That's the reason why he sold it.
I know.
He was like, you motherfuckers are too mean. I'm done. Like, I'm out.
It's crazy. And I get it that there's a fan base that you have to cater to. And maybe that's why they're doing like a Sean Levy, bring him in off the bench kind of movie where he's just going to give the fanboys exactly what they want, because that's what happened with Deadpool and Wolverine.
Populist cinema.
Yeah, he literally calls it that. So it's not even an insult. He sees it as a compliment.
Yep.
So, but is that the kind of creative process that you want on your $4 billion franchise? To come in and hire a journeyman director to just play basically the fan film angle?
And just be a hired gun.
Yeah.
At that point, right? Do you think heart and soul is going to get poured into that movie?
No. Yeah.
It's not going to happen.
And we're such a far cry from where this franchise began, where it was one guy who was fighting like hell to get this made. And he's pouring in all these ideas from everything that he's grown up with and loved over time. And now it's just, how can we right the ship and get anyone to come in and do a show? I mean, I don't want to discount the Ray movie director's work by any means. She won an Oscar for documentary work.
Of course. Yeah. And she did 2 very good episodes of Miss Marvel for Disney Plus.
But is that who you want for your major Star Wars movie?
Your big comeback.
Nobody has made like she has never made a narrative film. And that's not to say that she can't, but that's a risky move.
Yeah. Especially when they're in a time where all they're trying to do is mitigate risk.
Yeah, it almost feels like they're trying to take risks, but they're taking the wrong risks. It's tough, right? I mean, even giving Dave Filoni a full movie is a major risk. What are you doing there? He's never made
one. Never made one.
Like, if you look at the upcoming movies, you've got Jon Favreau, who, granted, has made movies before.
Good director.
But then you've got the other 2, the Ray movie and the Filoni movie, 2 first-time directors of narrative features.
Yep.
And that's who you're putting on your major franchise. And I get that everyone loves Dave Filoni because he worked with George Lucas and likes Star Wars, but that's not an accomplished director. So what are you doing?
I happen to like Star Wars. Can I direct the next Star Wars movie, Shane?
I think so. I think you should.
Yes.
Because we've nobody has ever made a bad movie after coming from animation before, like John Carter. Nobody's ever done that.
Or like Tomorrowland.
Yeah. You're 2 for 2 there with animation directors with feature films. So let's keep doing it.
And it's not to say that it can't be done.
No.
And we're big proponents on this show of taking the wait and see approach, and pass judgment once you've already seen the movie. If the movie ends up being good, then that's awesome, and that's what we root for.
I'll eat my words if they're good. It's just
100%
from a pure, like, when, for example, here's a good example. When Andor was coming out, I looked at the people making that show. I said, okay, the showrunner of House of Cards, Academy Award winning Tony Gilroy, and his brother Dan Gilroy, is that his name?
Yeah.
And
who made
worked on Nightcrawler, right?
Yeah.
All of those things that they've done were awesome.
Yep.
So the show is probably going to be awesome. And guess what? It was awesome.
It was awesome. Yeah.
So, like, what are the clues here? And that's where it feels like a Kathy problem, because Kathy is ultimately the one, maybe not ultimately the one, but she's the one greenlighting these projects. Mm-hmm. And honestly, that wasn't even her idea in the first place to get Tony Gilroy in there. She wanted to do some buddy cop
totally
K2SO thing.
Yep.
And Tony talked her out of it. So at that point, it's like, if she's the one putting the people in the positions to make the stuff, and she's not putting the right people in the right positions, then that's kind of her problem, right? Mm-hmm. I don't blame Leslie Headland for the Acolyte's failure.
Nope.
I think she did her best. But should Leslie Headland have had a $180 million budget for a show like that? No. Also, probably not. It's almost setting her up for failure.
Yeah. But again, that's not her fault.
No, it's not.
That's Disney saying,
no,
we're going to give you this much money, right? Like, if they would have told her, hey, we love your pitch, we think it's a great idea, here's $60 million, go make this show. I guarantee that show turns out very differently.
Yeah.
Because you have to be scrappy and make it work with what you've got.
Yeah, and right? Probably better, to be honest. You'd have to focus more on character and less on action, although the action was the best part of the show, so I don't know.
Hard to say. But it's tough because when you're a fan of something and when you enjoy it, you want it to do well.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's not fun to come on and talk about all these missteps on something that has been my favorite thing since I was 7 years old.
Yeah.
You know, I would love for them to find their way. I would love for them to start pumping out really good stuff, but it's hard to be excited for anything they're doing.
Yeah.
At the current moment, aside from Andor season 2.
Yeah.
But then once that's over, that's done. You know,
and
that rolls right into Rogue One, and then we're finished.
There's no indication that it's going to get better.
Right. Exactly.
Similar to how I talked about, there was no indication that the Acolyte would get better into season 2. There was no real indication of that, but you just have a hope and a prayer. Mm-hmm. That's kind of how I feel like about Star Wars in general, right? Maybe one of these things will hit, but there's nothing about the production pipeline and the things that are getting greenlit that leads me to believe that it's going to get any better.
Yeah.
The decision making just does not seem to make sense.
Yep.
And but I don't know.
At the same token, I know that we weren't the biggest fans of it, but a lot of Marvel people were like real down in the dumps about where Marvel was.
Yeah. Yeah.
And all it took was one movie.
It's true.
To get the feeling back. And all of a sudden Deadpool came out and people were like, oh man, that's right. I do love Marvel.
Yeah.
I can't wait. Doomsday? Yeah. Let's go. Captain America? I'm in, you know. It only takes one thing.
Yeah.
To really, you know, set things right. I don't know what
the
that
Mandalorian and Grogu, but maybe it is. Again, a hope and a prayer. I hope it is. I hope it's good.
Maybe Jon Favreau's writing will cater better to a big 2-hour spectacle blockbuster than it did to 8 episodes of TV.
Yeah.
Who knows?
It's possible.
Right? It's a tough one. It's a real rock and a hard place situation.
I think
for a lot of people.
Honestly, I think the way I would do it is almost take the Batman approach. You find kind of an auteur filmmaker and you just let him go crazy with it for a bit.
They tried that though.
They did, but you just got to stick with it this time because nothing else is working. You have to have somebody to put some new life into the franchise. I would get, I don't know who, but I would get somebody that can bring a new voice into it. And I know that this would never happen, but imagine like Denis Villeneuve making a Star Wars movie, right?
Yeah.
All it would take is that announcement and everyone's back on board.
Yeah.
Everyone's going to see that movie because of what he did with Dune Part 1 and Part 2 and what he's done with other science fiction properties. Everyone would go see that movie. It would look beautiful. I don't know how good it would be, but the track record suggests pretty good.
Pretty good. Yeah.
And I don't think anyone would be upset about that. You know, get someone like, you got Greta Gerwig doing the Chronicles of Narnia. Like, surely you can hire her, right? Somebody like that, like with a new voice and new ideas that has an established name behind her, that has made plenty of types of movies in the past. I don't know if she could make an action movie, but maybe it doesn't have to be an action movie. Maybe it can be something completely different.
Yep.
I don't think every Star Wars movie has to be exactly the same.
Agreed.
But it's something like that. It's a Chris Nolan, it's a Denis Villeneuve. Like, you have so much money, you could probably try and make it happen. And I think that those types of filmmakers are confident enough that they would not be dissuaded by the fandom aspect of it.
Or by the studio.
Yeah. Like, Chris Nolan's done a Batman movie.
Yeah.
That's
3 of them.
Yeah. Yeah. But you get my point that, like, he's not going to be intimidated by that. He's going to make his movie, and even if people hate it, he's going to stand by that.
He's going to stand by it.
And I feel like the confidence level of your filmmakers have to be at that level. Like, I think looking at those types of filmmakers, and not James Mangold, while I think he's a pretty good director.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ford versus Ferrari is very good. Logan was very good. I don't think he's the type of like really, invigorate the franchise type of guy. So I don't
I
know.
don't know who is.
And
Jordan
it
Peele,
it
maybe?
almost feels like you need the Hail Mary.
Like the Steven Spielberg kind of
Yeah.
thing. Yeah.
God, if they could get Steven Spielberg to do a movie, could you imagine?
They're fucking great. It'd be so good. Oh,
Man, and
man.
like
And
he's wanted to do one for years, and
he's making a UFO
I
movie
know,
that's
yeah,
coming out in 2 years.
but he's
Like,
old.
I know, I know. It's tough. I mean, Nolan would be my pick.
I think everyone, right?
If they could somehow get him to do one of those, I trust him a lot more than I trust a lot of other people
Yeah,
that are out there. Even his movies that are not my favorite are still extremely well made.
yeah, and he's no stranger to the franchise thing, but
Right.
does he want to do it? That's really the question
That's the
for
hard part.
him.
Yeah.
I think Denny would want to do it.
Yeah.
He seems like he would be a Star Wars guy. He's already done Blade Runner. He's already done Dune.
Mm-hmm.
Dune is pretty much Star Wars anyways.
I was going to say, it's funny because Dune has kind of become my new Star Wars,
Yeah.
where that's the thing that I'm like so invested in. And when I'm bored and sitting around doing nothing, I go, yeah, I want to watch Dune,
It's kind
because
of funny.
they're awesome.
It's kind of funny because when they announced The Force Awakens and J.J. Abrams was going to do it, I was like, that's perfect because he already made Star Wars. He made it in 2009 with Star Trek.
Yep.
Already did it. It kind of feels like that, right? There's such an obvious play here. Like Denny already made Star Wars with Dune. He can totally do it. But I just don't know if he wants to do it. He probably doesn't. I probably wouldn't want to either. But, and I think that's more of I just want to do my own thing now. I've proven myself with the franchises. But he also really loves Dune. So he's going to make another Dune movie.
Yeah, I also think there might be some trepidation there about working with Disney and Lucasfilm.
It's true. It's true.
I mean, I if I were a high profile director and I was getting forced into doing a franchise movie, I would not be looking at Disney. I would be looking at Warner Brothers or Paramount or Sony or somewhere else.
Yeah, I would have to have some pretty major assurances.
Yeah.
That I would get final cut, that I would get my say on things. And that's why I'm saying it almost has to be one of these auteur filmmakers that can command that level of respect from the studio, where the studio is just going to say yes to whatever they want to do. Because anybody else, the studio is just going to smash it to smithereens.
Yep. Yeah, it's a bummer, but that's kind of just where we're at
this point. It's sad because take me back to like the pre-Last Jedi days.
Ugh.
Where Force Awakens and Rogue One had just come out.
Blissful.
And everyone was so happy. And now there's just so much apathy towards the franchise, where aside from Andor, which I am ecstatic for, everything else coming out of this franchise, I grew up adoring this franchise. I have a Lego Millennium Falcon right next to me.
Yep.
And I don't really even care about the rest of the stuff they're producing. And that's a problem.
Yeah. Big time. And it's not even like it's diluted because they haven't had a movie come out in 6 years.
No.
Star
Wars Make a Movie Challenge. I say it all the time on this show.
It's the opposite of the superhero fatigue thing. It's just there's no direction, there's no path, and a lot of the stuff that has come out hasn't been very good, even though on paper all you have to do is like a halfway decent job with a Boba Fett show and it should be huge.
Yeah.
All you have to do is a halfway decent job with an Obi-Wan show and it should be huge.
They can't even clear that bar.
Like it's scary. It's tough right now, but
so this was our uplifting Star Wars conversation. We hope you enjoyed it.
Time to go.
Like and subscribe.
Hey, you know what though, man? Part of our mission statement here at this channel is to be very transparent and honest and critical when needed and uplifting when deserved. And Star Wars is in a little bit of a tough spot right now. And we're both fans of the franchise. We both want them to do well. I root for every next project that they have to come out and be the best thing that they've ever made.
Yeah.
I want that because I want good stories and I want good stuff to consume. So
I only wish that the conversation around all this was a little bit more constructive, because I feel like at this point people just flock to the diversity or the anything like that, the wokeness of all of it, and they just scream that really loud, and it drowns out the actual legit criticism of what's going on here.
Yep.
And that's what makes it tough, right? When I say, is Kathleen Kennedy doing a good job, I have a lot of people that'll jump in and say, oh, of course she is, because of course she is, because at the same time there's all these people that are like, no, fire Kathleen Kennedy because she put a woman in the show.
Right.
It's like, no, I don't agree with those people, but you can also take it and say, on its face, factually, is she doing a good job? And I don't think anyone would say yes, really, but it has to be this tribalism thing.
Right.
But it doesn't have to be this tribalism thing. Look at it on a factual basis. Star Wars is in a pretty dire spot right now. They need a win. And aside from Andor Season 2, I don't really see where it's going to come from. Maybe the Mando movie is going to be a smash hit. And again, I hope it is. But I think that this type of discussion and criticism is the stuff we need to be talking about. And it doesn't have to be, this is the best Star Wars show ever, or this is the worst thing that will kill the franchise ever. And it's those people batting heads against each other until everyone loses.
Yep. Which is what's happening right now.
Yeah.
We're all losing.
Yeah.
If you're a fan of the franchise, whether you love certain things to the point where you won't criticize them, or you hate certain things to the point where you won't say anything nice about them, you're losing.
Yeah.
Unfortunate truth.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that being said,
that's why we needed the alcohol for this one.
I think that's going to do it for this episode. If you know what, we talked a lot here today. Did. We would love to hear your thoughts. I would love to hear how people feel about the future of the Star Wars franchise. Do you think it's in a good place and we're just wrong up here, or do you agree with us, or are you somewhere in the middle, apathetic, excited, whatever? Share your thoughts with us. Like the video. Oh God, no one's gonna like this video because it's nothing but depressing negativity. But just hit the like button so that the algorithm picks it up and more people can be sad like you. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Check out our other video about Alien Romulus. It is much more positive than this one. If you need an uplifting thing, if you watched it already, go back and watch it again. Get those views up, baby. Come on, let's go. We will be back, God knows when, talking about God knows what.
Probably Rings of Power, which will be not divisive at all.
Oh yeah, sure. Another internet
totally
darling
show. That one. I saw a quote earlier where the showrunner compared it to Oppenheimer. I was like, surely the internet will be totally fine with that.
Great. It's gonna be a lot of fun. Really, really excited for that. Yeah, and then we have some other topics that we want to talk about, in this little bit of a lull in between new shows and movies that usually happens in August and September. So thanks for stopping by, and until next time, we will see you in the next video.